In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to create a new user form to be able to run some macros, but through a interface rather than running our macros through the macro manager. So the first thing we have to do is we have to open our macro manager if it's not already open. Mine is, but if yours is not, we go to Tools, Macros, and we can choose Macro Manager. And then we also need to open the macro editor here. So we'll go ahead and do that. And let's go back into CorelDRAW. So here in our macro manager, we're going to go ahead and click on New. And we're going to choose New Macro Project. And let's just give it some type of name. So we're going to call it My LED Neon Helper, because the macros that I want to put in here are for when I'm working on a LED neon sign layout. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And you can see here that we have a new GMS file here. It's called My LED Neon Helper. So now we can go ahead and we can edit this. So what we want to do is go up here to Tools and then come down here to Macros, and now we can go into our macro editor. And in here, we should be able to see lots of macros, but more specifically, we're looking for the My LED Neon Helper macro. Okay, and once we find that, we can right-click and choose to insert a user form, and now you can see it says user form 1. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and leave it at that. So we're going to come down here to caption under the user form 1. And what do we want this title to say here? Well, let's call it My LED Neon Helper version 1.0. Okay, we'll call it version 1.0. And we'll hit enter. And now you can see that we have a new title block. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add some controls, add some features to this. So what we want to do is we want to add some buttons here. So when we click on a button, it performs a task. So you see there is our button, and then we can give this button a name. So here again, we're down under caption, and we want to give this button some type of text. So whatever we type in there, you can see now the caption has been updated. So what do we want this button to do? Let's call it Mark OBGY. So we're going to mark object. So that's what that button is going to do. It's going to allow us to mark an object. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and duplicate this button. And what do we want this button to do? So now we want to go ahead and copy, and we can paste. And so now we have a duplicate of this button. And so what do we want the duplicate to say? Well, I want the duplicate button to make selection. So now we'll go ahead and expand this button because we want it to make a selection, and then we'll go ahead and expand this button. And we might even go ahead and change let's go back to the user form here. And we can even give the user form a new name. So you see it says user form 1. So we could give this a new name if we wanted to. So to make this user form a little bit more descriptive, I guess you could say. So let's call it FORM. So that's form My LED. Something like that. And that will just give it a more specific name. In case we have multiple forms, we can better know exactly which form we want. So now that we've expanded this button size, let's go ahead and change the caption. Instead of mark obj, let's just go ahead and do mark object. Okay. And then instead of make selection, let's call it create selection. So we will create selection. Okay, so now we're going to mark the object and then we're going to create a selection. And let's just stop right there for the time being, because now we want to add some code to these two buttons. So we're going to get our code from previously created macros. And in this case here, you see it says sub mark reference object. So we will go ahead and copy this information. And then we will go back to our user form here, which is where again? So it's not under Kevin Custom Macro, my form LED, yes. Double click on this mark object, and you can see it says command button click, mark reference object. So what we're going to do is we are going to copy this up here and paste. And then we can go ahead and get rid of this. And we will get rid of this. And then we will get rid of this. So now we have a private sub mark reference object dot click. Okay. So now if we go back to this button, you see it's command button 1. And see where it says command button 1 dot click. So that's what this needs to be. So we'll go ahead and copy that. So now if we go back here and double click on this, this is what it does. So that's perfect. That's what we needed to do. So now we can move on to the next thing. So back under Kevin's custom macros, under module 1 here, the next thing is select by fill color. So we're going to select everything in between the start and end there. And we'll come back over here. There is our new sub for our next task, which is it says command button 2. Now if we go back to this first thing here, so we can do CMDB. So we can do underscore mark object. Okay. So now we know that that button is named CMD underscore mark object. So if we come over here, you can see there, it's created us a new sub for that. And so we're going to have to take all of this right here and copy it into there, and then we no longer need it up here. So you see we have a command button mark object. Okay, so it's a little bit more specific. So we're going to kind of do the same thing for this button. So we'll come down here and command button underscore, and then we'll call it create SEL. Okay, so that'll be create selection. So that's what this one will do. So you see here, we have this. So now we can take all of this code here and put it up here. And now when we click on that button, it'll run that code. So now we don't need this at all anymore. So this is the two buttons that we currently have available. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what we need to do, because now we are going to need a macro that is going to load this form. So let's pop out here to the web and get some help from AI and find out how we can create a function. So we're going to call CorelDRAW VBA, create macro to open form. Or we could even type in user form to be more specific. And then we'll take a look at how to go about doing this. This is the code, userform.show open my user form. So let's go ahead and copy this to the clipboard. And let's add a module. So we're going to insert a module, and this module is going to hold my macros. So you see here it says sub open my user form, and it says userform.show. This opens the user form module, blocks interaction with CorelDRAW. So we don't want this, and it says user form or user form modeless, and this allows interactions with CorelDRAW. So we will comment this out, right? And then we will uncomment this, and now there it is, user form 1. But instead of user form 1, we're going to be doing form. So we're going to type in FRM, form, and then myLED. .show.vbs modeless. Okay, so now if we look under myLED neon helper, what you're going to see is only that one function, and that is to open the my user form. And you can see now that we have our form open, but we also have our drawing open as well, and we can interact between the two. So we're going to mark this object. Let's try this one. And we're going to click on Mark Object. And then we're going to select our entire selection, and we're going to hit Create Selection. And you see what it does. It creates a selection of all of those shapes. And the one that we marked has not been duplicated. So now we have a user form with those first two functions in it. All right. So now I would like to add a couple of more buttons to this function, or to this user form. So let's go ahead and edit this. And so here is the form in question. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate this. And for the caption for this, we are going to set size to 0.25, I think. So that means, yeah, set size to 0.25 is fine. And then let's go to set size to 4.5 millimeter. I think that works. So now we have those two functions, but notice the name is command button 1. So we're going to give this a more useful name. So command button underscore 225. Okay, and then this one, we will set its name to command button underscore 4.5 millimeters, something like that. Now it's saying you can't do that, and that's because it doesn't like the point millimeter. So that's no problem. So we can do cm command button underscore 245 mm. We don't necessarily need the period there anyhow, because we have it up here. So you see how this is set size to 4.5 millimeters, not quite big enough. The button's not quite big enough. So we will make that button slightly larger. And then we'll make all the buttons slightly larger to match that button. Okay, so now we want to set size to 1/4 inch. And I believe those are under my custom macros. Let's see. No. There's nothing. I see actually okay, and I also see a toggle units. Okay, so yes, there is a to 1/4 inch. So we're going to copy that and go back to my form here. And so we want to look at the code for that button. So the command 225 button. And we'll paste that code. Okay. And so that looks good. So now we'll go back to our form. And it doesn't look like this. Oh, no, it did. Command 245. So let's go back into my custom macro storage here and grab the sub for resizing to 4.5 millimeters that we previously made. And so we can just click on that button, take us to the code, and there it is. Hit enter a couple of times and paste that code. And yes, now we're good to go here for that button. Okay, so now if I look at this form here and I type in, let's view the code for this form. We don't need this sub, so we'll go ahead and get rid of it. So there is the 2.5, there is the mark selected, there is the create selection, and then finally the 2.45 millimeter. So we're good to go there. So this one here, we're just going to type in 2. There we go. So now if I click on that, yes, it takes us right to that previously listed code there, 225. Okay, so that's good. All of that is great. So under my custom macros here, we still have to do the toggle, the toggle units. So back here under my LED, let's go ahead and copy a new button. And yeah, let's go ahead and move it over here. And let's call it command. So command button underscore toggle units. Okay. And we'll hit enter. And then for the caption, we are going to also type in toggle units. Okay. And then we're going to go back up to my custom macro storage here, and we're going to copy that code to this button. So there's our button. We'll paste our button info right there. So there we have all of that taken care of now. So that will toggle our units. And then we can mark an object, we can create the selection, and we can set the size of the shapes that we have selected. So that's pretty good place to start, I think. So let's go ahead and save that GMS file for future use. So now let's go ahead and let's just go up here to open my user form. And now we see there's our user form. You can see our units are currently in inches, but if I click on toggle units, they're now in millimeters. If I click on toggle units, they're back in inches. If I click on toggle units and click a shape over here, you see that the dimensions are in fact in millimeters, but if I toggle the units, now you can see that the selection value is shown in inches. So how fun is that? So that can be quite useful for future needs. And then let's go ahead and select all these circles. So we're going to mark this object. We're going to go ahead and make a selection. So create the selection of those that match the referenced shape. And then we're going to set all of the shapes to 4.5 millimeters. And so you'll see all these shapes change. So, yeah, we can mark our object. We can create our selection, and then all of our circles are selected. We can set the size of those circles to be 4.5 millimeters. And now you can see they're no longer a 1/4 inch. But we'll mark it again. And we'll set our size back to 0.25. But notice I selected everything there, and I shouldn't have done that. So notice now that there is, when I back out of this, because I made the mistake of setting the size before I created the selection, we would have to back out, and it only will let us go backwards so far. So there, we could update our macro with what they call a begin, and where you're going to begin a command group, and then you can undo a command group with. So if we run a macro accidentally, we can undo, and it'll undo everything it did, no matter how many steps were involved. So we may look at adding that option to begin or end a command group. In this case, I don't really need to save this anyhow because I already have it saved, so I could just close that out. And then I can reopen it. So we will find K-State again. And it's no big deal because I have that condition already set. So again, we will ungroup there. So we'll go ahead and ungroup. Okay, so we'll go ahead and mark that object. We will create our selection, and then we will set our size to 1/4 of an inch, and all of our circles now are in fact 1/4 of an inch. So I think that's it. That's all we wanted to add. Let's see here. My custom, we got the resize to 1/4, 4.5. Underneath, my new project was just something we were working on, so we don't need that anymore. The mark selected, and we don't need any of this. The selection demo, and then Kevin's custom macro. We have the mark reference and select. So really, this right here has everything in it that we need. The My LED Neon Helper. So we can right click on this and choose Edit. And then I just go ahead and hit File and save that GMS file to make sure that all of those updates have been added. So the rest of that, we don't technically need any of those other GMS files any longer. So I hope you learned a little something in this one and found it useful for when you're creating your macros. You can create yourself a nice little user form to initiate those very, very quickly and easily. Thanks for watching.